Today, what we're going to do is unpack how you can use layers in your own workflows so you can take your photos to the next level using layers inside of ON1 Photo RAW. Let's go. All right, so here we are inside of ON1 Photo RAW, and I have a photo pulled up. Now, I haven't done anything to the image. I just want to kind of orient you to what's happening inside of ON1. For those of you who aren't familiar, whenever you open an image inside of Edit in ON1, you automatically create a layer. You can see that I've renamed my image. Instead of it being named DSC099965, I relabeled it to say base, and you can rename these. So that's kind of the first aspect, right? I can make this say whatever I want, but we're going to leave that set to base. So let me just reset this to base. Boom. So now what you can do is really start to add images to this area. All right. If I click on the plus icon, what it's going to do is open up to, in my case, the last folder that I had open, which was extras. Now, usually what it does is it opens up to the folder where the image that you're working on is stored. So in this case, it's actually inside of the American History Museum folder for me. That's where I have this particular image stored. But if I wanted to add in something like a creative element, I can come to ON1 extras or my own extras, and I can choose any of the extras that ON1 has to offer. But in my case, I'm going to come to my extras, click on backgrounds, because this is where I've stored my own imported extras. And then of course, I can click on any one of these. I'm just going to add a Atmos number 3, and I'll add a glass effect. We'll go with glass 18. It's really not as important which one you choose to go with. This is just the one that I'm choosing to go with. And then once I add it to the image, I have a few options. But what I really want to show is I have my base image, and then I have my glass image sitting right on top of it. Okay. This is where the power of layers really comes in. If I wanted to, I could blend this by clicking on the drop down, and I can come over to lighten because the background is all black. If I use lighten, it's going to allow me to blend that. Now, what you are seeing is the effect of me blending the two layers together. No different than what you would do inside of Photoshop. It works the exact same way. And if I wanted to, I can come over here to my transform tool, which is this little move tool right here. And I can rotate this around so I can make my effect go vertical on the image. And now you can see how it sits right over this tower, okay? And how it kind of just fits perfectly into the edges of the tower. And maybe that's the effect I want to go for. Maybe it's not, but that's how you can use blend modes. And then I also have the ability to use opacity. So maybe that's too strong and I want the underlying portion of the image to kind of shine through as well. I can just bring my opacity down until it gets to a point where I'm happy. What we can also do with layers is mask in certain aspects. So maybe I'm a huge fan of what's happening at the top, but I don't really care what's happening down here in the tree area. So I can click on my mask and I can set my mask to erase. And if I make it large enough, I can just paint over this area. And now it has gotten rid of that effect in that area. Now, you want to make sure that you paint away all of the places that you don't want this effect in. So if I don't ever want it to be in the sky area here, then I need to paint it away there, as well as all the way up here. Now, if I hit the letter O, you can see essentially what I just did with that mask. And if I show you the red overlay, you can kind of see what's happening here, right? And that is what we got going on with this particular image. All right. Now you're probably wondering, like, Chris, why is it showing me the image of the glass or, you know, this overlay effect instead of the composite blend? And the reason for that, if I set this to the red overlay, it has to show me the image that it is painting out. And anywhere that you see red, that means that it's removing that portion from the image. If I go back to gray, it's doing the exact same thing. It's just showing me in a grayscale. So that's why you don't see that. So if that ever happens to you, don't worry. Just hit the letter O or turn off your mask, and then you'll get back to your composite image. But it has to show you essentially what it's masking out and which layer that you have selected to mask out. If you got questions, leave it in the comment section below. I'll be more than happy to answer that. The second way of using layers is you can duplicate the image that you're working on. So if I hit the duplicate button, which is the second button next to the plus icon, it's going to duplicate the layer that you have selected. Now, what I didn't tell you earlier is I selected the base layer. So let me just do that one more time. And if you ever mess up in layers, it's super easy to fix. You can just right click on the layer, and then I can delete the layer that I don't want anymore. So now what I'm going to do is click on the base layer, and then I'm going to hit my duplicate layer icon. That now gives me a copy of my base layer. So we'll label this layer 2 just to keep it simple. And if I were to click on that layer, which I have it selected, it's hard to kind of see, but there's a light gray box as opposed to the other options here. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on Brilliance AI. This is going to give the photo just a quick look, and that's all that I'm really trying to do. You could use a preset, you could use essentially anything, whatever you choose to do. But I actually like what Brilliance AI did here. All right. Now, if I were to turn this off, you can see that it's showing me the underlying layer or the base layer. And then if I turn layer 2 back on, I'm getting all of my adjustments. Now, what's cool about this, if I open up toning and click on base, you can see there's no adjustments on the base layer, but I have all of my adjustments on the tone and color layer. Now, like I showed earlier, what you can do is you can click on the mask, and let's say I like everything except for the sky. So I'm just going to go ahead and erase what's happening in the sky. I'm going to do this relatively crudely just to show you kind of what's happening, right? So let's say that that's what I like. It's not perfect. This is just for an example, all right? But essentially, I'm showing the sky that's underneath, combining it with the photo that I've added Brilliance AI to, so that way I can get like a blend between the two. And of course, I can always change the opacity if I so choose. Now, I'm going to reset this mask. So I'm going to right click on the mask and then hit reset mask. Some other options that you get with the layers panel here are a solid color layer. All right. So if I click this, I get to choose whatever color. And if you're on a PC, this is going to look a little bit different for you, but it'll all work essentially the same. You can select a color. I'll go with a red, hit OK. Now, by default, it goes to the top of your layer stack. You can put this wherever you want in your layer stack. So if I want it to be in between my base layer and my layer up above, I can do so. And then if I wanted to, I can click on the layer number 2. I can grab my brush tool and I'm just going to paint in this little area. And you can see it's bringing up that red underlay in the areas that I'm painting. Now, I would never do that, but I just wanted to showcase what you could do. Now, where these color fill layers really come in handy is when you're creating a card and you need a background, and then you want to kind of shrink some of the assets over it. So if we'll just go ahead and reset the mask here, so that way we don't have that issue with the red little dots. I'm going to grab my move tool, and then I'm just going to scale down this image. And you can see I'm kind of creating a border around my image. And you could do this however you see fit. So maybe if the border tool inside of ON1 doesn't work the way that you want it to, you can just add a color fill layer and then scale your image down proportionately. And now I have a red border. And if I say, you know what, I actually want to change the color of this fill layer, I can just right click on the layer and then I can click on edit color fill. Now you can also add a color fill layer just by right clicking, and then you're adding another one. That's essentially the same thing as clicking the button down here. But if you want to change or edit the color fill, you can click there. And let's say I now want this border to be blue. I can hit blue, hit OK. And now I've changed the background. I did not add a new layer. I just changed the color of the layer that was already in my layer stack. And then of course, the reason you don't see the base layer image is because this layer is at 100% opacity. If I were to pull this down, you'll start to see that underlying layer, and you can kind of see it in the bushes down here. So, that's an option. And a cool stylistic thing is I could just click on the base. I can come over to effects and I can add in a blur, and you see how it's blurring that base image. It's not affecting the layer image that I have the Bruins AI applied to. It's only the base image that's being affected. And I can just push this blur all the way up and kind of make a background picture for my picture, a background frame for my picture, whatever you want to call it. And, you can just blend this to your heart's content. So that's kind of a way of working in layers, creative idea. Hey, let me interrupt for a quick second and let you know that ON1 Photo RAW is having a virtual conference. It's called the RAW Unleashed Conference. And this is going to be a great opportunity for guest speakers to share their knowledge and understanding of ON1 Photo RAW and giving you creative ideas of how you can use it in your own workflow. Now, some of the speakers that you're going to have at the conference, you already know, like Dan and Dylan. Then there's going to be people that are outside of the ON1 team, such as Scott Davenport, Scott Kelby, Anthony Morganti, Austin Jackson, and Rick LePage. I think this is going to be a great conference for anyone who's looking to really grow in the richness and knowledge and the usability of ON1 Photo RAW in their own workflow. So consider buying a ticket today. And if you want to save a little bit of money, consider using my coupon code FreeWillPhotos20. If you check the description box of this video, you will find the link to the page where you can purchase a ticket. And if you got questions, leave it in the comment section below. Now, let's get back to our content. You also have the text tool, which I'm not going to go over in this particular video, but if you want to add text to your images, then this is the tool that you can do that with. All right. And then you have your delete layer button here. Now, what I'm going to do is click on layer 2, because one of the other ways that layers works is by using plugins. All right. It brings your plugins back as a layer. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on layer, come over to filters. And if you have any plugins that are supported by ON1, this is where you will find them. And then I'm going to click on Boris effects. That's just the effect that I feel like applying to this particular image. Now, it is only sending the image that I rescaled. It's not sending the whole thing. All right. If I wanted the whole thing, I'll show you how to do that here in a little bit. But it's only sending the image that I rescaled, but it's paying attention to the fact that it was rescaled. We'll just hit yes to this. I don't know what I last did in here, but it apparently didn't do anything. We'll add an atmospheric glow because I was just looking at that. That looks kind of cool. We'll say that we like that. I'm going to hit apply. It's now going to return my image back to ON1. Okay. So now I have the corrected version, or the optic version, right? The Boris Effects optics, but we'll just call this plugin render, right? That's the layer that just came back from the plugin. If I turn this off, you'll see that I just have my normal photo. And if I turn it back on, you'll see that I have the rendered plugin. And then of course, if I wanted to, I could just hover over all of these blend modes, figure out which one works the best for what I was trying to do there. Dark color doesn't seem to do a bad job of kind of just honing in on the tower, but you could do all kinds of stuff. So maybe I like this, right? This doesn't look too bad. I don't know. I'm just messing around here. So we'll say hard light looks good. So we'll come down, select hard light. And now I have the plugin render blending with hard light with the underlying layers. All right. Not just the layer directly under it, but all of the layers. Let me show you what that means. If I were to turn off everything, you can see this layer. If I come back up here, go to normal, this is what normal looks like. And then this is what hard light looks like with that blended, or with that blurred version, which is our base layer down at the bottom. And the reason why it's blending with this layer is because I turned off the other layers that are in between it. Now, you can move and reorder all of your layers. So if I want this color fill layer to come up on top, I'll turn that back on. You can see now I'm adding a blue fill to the entire image at a 56% opacity. And then if I want that glass look to come back into the image, I can do so. And if I need to reset this mask, I can reset it. And you can really start to build up some things in your photo here. So maybe I want to move that look all the way. I don't know. It's still using the light and blend mode, which makes sense. But maybe I want to change the blend mode, right? These are all non-destructive edits. Now, I wouldn't recommend any of what I'm doing here. I'm really just trying to showcase kind of how it works and walk through some of the scenarios. Usually, whenever I use these assets that I have here, I typically use lighten because I want to knock out the black background. So that makes sense. But, maybe I'm going for some sort of ethereal glow over this entire image. So that is a way of working with all of these plugins. Now, with these layers. But remember, whenever you bring a plugin back from that software, it's going to render its own layer. So what does that really mean for us? I'm just going to reset the scale of this image. So I'm going to come back over here, put that at 100. So that way it fills the entire area. Now remember, what I have is a blurred version and then a Brilliance AI version of this image so far. If I wanted to, after, I've made all these adjustments. In fact, I'll just showcase it with this. So we'll go here and I am going to scale this up just a little bit so it fills up the entire frame. And we'll say that works. Okay. And so now I have like this smaller version and this larger version. And this, if I'm not mistaken, because it's blended with hard light, I'm seeing the layer 2 underneath the plugin version. Well, let's say I like this look and I want to send it back to another edit. I can right click and I can come down to one of these options. All right. I have the option to merge a layer, to merge visible, and a new stamped layer. If you want to edit non-destructively, you use new stamped layer. Then I'm just going to go ahead and click that. It's going to do its thing. It's looking at all of the layers that have the little circle. So all of the layers that had the little circle, it was turning those into a combined layer. So let me go ahead and turn off all of these. When I turn this off, you're going to see the little gray overlay or the grid overlay. And then when I turn it back on, you'll see that I have those images that I just merged together. Now, if I were to turn off the plugin layer, and let's rename this really quickly. This is a stamped layer. That way we know what we got. And then if I were to turn off the plugin layer, I'm back to just the Brilliance AI version. And then if I turn off the layer 2, then I'm back to the transparent because I'm not showing any layers. And whenever you see this little checkerboard grid, that means that there's no information being shown. All right. And if I turn on the base layer, you can see what's happening. Then I can turn on layer 2. You can also see what's happening. You can see that I'm starting to show pixels. All right. And then the plugin render. But if I turn off all of those and I turn on the stamped layer, I get that final render of the plugin layer and the underlying layer. Okay. Now, with every layer, you get an instance or the ability to edit using Brilliance AI, using tone and color. You also get local adjustments and you get effects. So if I wanted to, I can throw in, let's see, something that's going to be very noticeable. Let's go with a split tone. And then I'll just go with figured it would be a little bit more. We'll just increase the colors here. That way it's very obvious. All right. Not going for super cool, artsy, going for something that's very obvious, but who knows? Maybe this is cool. Let me know in the comment section if you think this is cool. Then what I can do is I can come to the plugin layer under here, but let me turn that on. And then I can use a opacity slider to reduce what's happening here. There we go. So now what you're seeing is the underlying layer. If I turn that off, you're not seeing much of anything. All right. But if I turn it back on, you can see it's just blending the opacity of the stamp layer with the plugin layer. And then of course I can go through all the blend modes and maybe add in this effect layer with the underlying layer, you know, and maybe we'll increase the opacity so that way it's a little bit more obvious. But I don't know, light color does this, like just completely messing around here. But hopefully this is making sense for those of you who are asking, what can I do with layers? How do they work? Now, the last thing that I will show you with the layers, and I'm going to do that by turning off that, turn on the base. Let's come back to the effect for blur. We'll get rid of that. And we'll also go with this one. Now, I am going to take this particular layer and I'm just going to rotate it. So if I turn it off, you can see it's just out of rotation, but we know that they should be able to align. So what I can do is turn it on, and then I can right click, and then down here where it says align visible layers, if this works, it's just going to take that image and align it with the underlying image. Now, if I turn on this layer, and we'll go back, rotate this one more time. So now it's out of rotation. It's looking all sorts of crazy, right? If I click align visible layers, it's going to align everything again for me, taking in consideration this layer up here. All right. Now, the trick to using align visible layers, you can see it didn't do a perfect job because the effect that was on stamped layer number, or on the stamped layer, it actually was one scaled image and one not scaled image, right? And that's what gave us the parallax or the double exposure look, if you will. Well, that's something that you want to pay attention to. I would only recommend using the align visible layers if you know for a fact that they can be truly aligned and that the skew is the same and the scale is relatively the same. All right. That is my only caution to you with using the align visible layer option. But once all of that is done, if you want to save this, I'm not going to save this because I don't necessarily need this to be on my hard drive. But if you want to save this, know that it is going to save a .on photo file. The more layers that you add here, the larger that file is going to be. The good news is it's non-destructive. The bad news is it could take a little bit of time depending on the power and strength of your machine. So my recommendation is once you have gotten your final look that you are okay with and you know that you are not coming back to edit this image, reduce it down to 2 layers. Reduce it down to a version where there's no edits and then a version with all of your edits. The way that you do that is, again, I have my base layer here. Let's say I want to add this blue to it as well. I'm going to come to the top. I'm going to hit right click, and then I'm going to click new stamped layer. Once this is done, I'm going to rename this final. So we'll click there, name it final. And then everything else, I'm just going to delete. So we'll delete this one. And I think you get the point, right? Deleting all of the layers. Don't need that one either. So delete layer. Now I have final and base. One, this gives me all of the edits that I've done, minorly destructive, right? If I want to come back and re-edit this image, I'm not going to have all of those other layers with all of my edits that I made. That is the downside to this method. The plus side to this method is you are not overriding your base image, your raw image. Because if you do that and you leave this version as final, then it does kind of mess with the ON1 file that is rendering your develop settings here. So my recommendation is if you are going to work with layers, you still want to end with a .on photo file. And to do that, you have to have 2 separate layers. All right. I know that could be a little confusing, but the bottom line is if you are working with your files and you want to use layers, make sure that when you get done using the layers that you have 2 layers in the layer panel, and then you can hit the check mark and that will be okay. Now, I want to show you the .on photo file. So we're going to let this render out. This is actually going to save a lot faster than if I had all those other layers, because there's only 2 layers that it's trying to save, and the base layer is actually pretty straightforward and simple. But you can see I have DSC09965 dot on photo. All right, so this is that image, and let me see if I can get them into a film strip, or we'll do compare. There we go. So the file on the right is the .on photo file, and the file on the left is the original file. If I were to double click and go into this particular image for editing, then I would start over from scratch. But if I were to open this one, then I would open up with those 2 layers. So hopefully that made sense. If it didn't, please let me know down in the comment section. You can also get a hold of me through my contact information that's also found in the description of this video. So with that, I know I said a lot, and I want to help anyone who has questions about layers. I feel like this was a really deep dive into using layers inside of ON1 Photo RAW. But if you really do have questions of how can I use the layers for my particular workflow, the best thing to do is to sign up for a one-on-one coaching call with me, and I will answer the specific question that you have about ON1 Photo RAW. All right. You can do that by going to the description box, and you'll find the one-on-one coaching link. Go over to the website, schedule an appointment, and I will see you there. Until next time, I want you guys to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.